Sarah Martinez looked at the clock on the restaurant wall. It was only 3 in the afternoon, but she had already been working for 6 hours. Her feet hurt in her cheap black shoes, and her back ached from carrying heavy plates. She still had 5 more hours to go before her shift ended. The restaurant was called the Golden Spoon. It was a fancy place where rich people came to eat expensive food. Sarah had been working there for 2 years now. She knew every table, every dish on the menu, and every type of customer who walked through the doors. Sarah wiped down table number 12 for the 3rd time that day. The customers had left a mess. Sauce was spilled on the white tablecloth, and crumbs were scattered everywhere. She cleaned it all without complaining. She needed this job too much to complain about anything. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from her mother's doctor. The message made her stomach twist with worry. Her mother needed another treatment, next week. The cost would be $3,000. Sarah looked at her bank account on her phone app. She had only $800 saved. Sarah had been taking care of her mother ever since her father died 3 years ago. He had a heart attack at work one day and never came home. Before he died, Sarah's life was very different. She was studying music at the city's best music school. She played piano and dreamed of becoming a professional musician. But when her father died, everything changed. The family had no money saved. The medical bills from his heart attack were huge. Her mother got sick from the stress and sadness. Sarah had to quit school and find work to pay the bills and take care of her mother. Nobody at the restaurant knew about Sarah's past. She never talked about her music education. She never mentioned that she could play piano better than most people could ever imagine. It felt too painful to think about what she had lost. Sometimes, late at night, she would sit at the old piano in their small apartment and play softly so the neighbors would not hear. But mostly she tried not to think about music at all. The restaurant manager, Mr. Peterson, walked over to Sarah's section. He was a thin man who always looked worried. "Sarah," he said, "you need to take care of table 15. They just sat down, and they look important." Sarah looked over at table 15. 3 men in expensive suits were sitting there. They had gold watches and perfect haircuts. Their shoes probably cost more than Sarah made in a month. She recognized one of them from the newspaper. He was some kind of business owner who built tall buildings in the city. She took her notepad and walked to their table. "Good afternoon," she said with her best smile. "Welcome to the Golden Spoon. Can I start you with some drinks?" The men barely looked at her. They kept talking about their business deals and money. One of them waved his hand at Sarah like she was bothering him. "Just bring us your best wine," he said, "and make it quick. We have important things to discuss." Sarah went to get their wine. She was used to being treated like she was invisible. Rich customers often acted like the people who served them were not real humans. They talked about private things right in front of her, as if she could not hear or understand what they were saying. When she brought the wine back, the men were talking about buying more buildings. They mentioned numbers that were bigger than Sarah could imagine, millions and millions of dollars. While they talked about spending so much money on buildings they did not even need, Sarah was worried about finding $3,000 to help her sick mother. The afternoon went by slowly. Sarah served more tables, cleaned more messes, and smiled at customers who treated her poorly. Her feet hurt more with each hour. The smell of expensive food made her stomach growl, but she could not afford to eat at the restaurant where she worked. During her short break, Sarah sat in the back alley behind the restaurant. She called her mother to check on her. Her mother's voice sounded weak and tired. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" Sarah asked. "I'm okay, dear. Don't worry about me." "How is work?" Sarah did not want to tell her mother about the doctor's text message. Her mother already felt bad that Sarah had to work so hard to take care of her. "Work is fine, Mom. I'll be home late tonight. I picked up an extra shift." After the call, Sarah sat alone in the alley for a few more minutes. She looked at her hands. Once these hands had played beautiful music. She remembered performing at her school's concerts. People would clap and smile when she played. Her piano. Teacher had said she had a special gift. Now her hands carried plates and cleaned tables. Her fingers, which used to dance across piano keys, now held rags and dirty dishes. Sometimes she caught herself moving her fingers like she was playing piano, but she would quickly stop when she realized what she was doing. Sarah went back inside to finish her shift. The restaurant was getting busy with the dinner crowd. More rich people came in, wearing expensive clothes and talking loudly about their money and success. Sarah served them all with the same polite smile, even though inside she felt tired and sad. Near the end of her shift, she was cleaning glasses behind the bar when she overheard two customers talking. They were discussing a piano concert they had seen the night before. They talked about how beautiful the music was and how talented the pianist was. Sarah's heart felt heavy as she listened. She remembered how it felt to make music, to touch people's hearts with the songs she played. But that life seemed so far away now, like a dream she had once had but could never have again. When her shift finally ended at 9 o'clock, Sarah was exhausted. She counted her tips for the day, $43. It was better than some days, but still not nearly enough to help with her mother's medical bills. Sarah walked to the bus stop in the dark, the city lights reflected in the puddles on the street from the afternoon rain. She thought about her father and wondered what he would say if he could see her now. Would he be proud that she was working so hard to take care of the family? Or would he be sad that she had given up her dreams? The bus ride home took 30 minutes. Sarah used the time to close her eyes and rest. Tomorrow, she would get up early and do it all again. She would serve more tables, clean more messes, and smile at more people who did not see her as a real person with dreams and feelings. But tonight, when she got home, maybe she would sit at the old piano for just a few minutes. Maybe she would let her fingers remember what it felt like to make music, even if nobody else would ever hear it again. Victor Blackwood walked into the Golden Spoon like he owned the place. In fact, he owned the building where the restaurant was located, along with dozens of other buildings in the city. At 45 years old, Victor had more money than most people could count. He had started with nothing and built a business empire that made him one of the richest men in the state. But money had not made Victor a kind person. Instead, it had made him cruel and mean. He enjoyed using his power to make other people feel small and worthless. He thought poor people were poor because they were lazy or stupid. He believed he was better than everyone else because he had more money. Victor sat at his usual table, table number 8, right in the center of the restaurant where everyone could see him. He liked people to notice him and know who he was. 3 of his business friends sat with him. They were also rich, but not as rich as Victor, and they laughed at everything he said because they wanted to stay in his good favor. "Look at this place," Victor said loudly, making sure other people in the restaurant could hear him. "Full of people pretending to be important. But real power, real success, that's something you're born with. You either have it or you don't." His friends nodded and agreed, even though they did not really understand what he meant. Victor often said things that sounded deep but were actually quite empty and mean. A young waitress approached their table. Victor looked at her with cold eyes. He always studied the people who served him, looking for ways to entertain himself at their expense. This waitress was different from the others he had seen before. She was pretty but in a tired way, like someone who worked too hard and slept too little. "Good evening," the waitress said politely. "My name is Sarah, and I'll be taking care of your table tonight. Can I start you with drinks?" Victor did not answer her question right away. Instead, he stared at her hands as she held her notepad. He noticed something unusual. Her fingertips were hard and had small marks on them. These were not the soft hands of someone who had always been a waitress. "What's your story?" Victor asked suddenly. Sarah looked confused. "I'm sorry, sir?" "Your story. Your life. What made you end up here, serving tables to people like me?" Sarah's face turned red. She was not used to customers asking personal questions. I work here, sir. Can I get you something to drink?" But Victor was not done with her. He was like a cat playing with a mouse. "Those hands," he said, pointing at her fingers. "Those aren't waitress hands. What did you do before this job?" Sarah tried to hide her hands behind her back. "I've been working here for 2 years, sir. Would you like to see our wine list?" Victor's friends were starting to pay attention now. They could see that Victor was playing one of his cruel games with the waitress. They had seen him do this before with other service people. He would find something about them that made them uncomfortable, then push and push until they were embarrassed or upset. I bet you went to college, Victor continued. Am I right? Let me guess. You studied something useless. Art? Music? Something that doesn't make money in the real world? Sarah's hands were shaking slightly now. Victor saw this and smiled. He was enjoying making her uncomfortable. Please, sir, Sarah said quietly. I just want to take your drink order. Answer the question first, Victor said. What did you study? I'm curious about how someone with an education ends up here. Sarah looked around the restaurant. Other customers were starting to stare. She felt trapped and embarrassed. I studied music, she said very quietly. Victor's eyes lit up with cruel joy. Music. Did you hear that, boys? Our waitress is a musician. He said the word musician like it was something disgusting. His friends laughed, though some of them looked uncomfortable. One of them, a man named Robert, tried to change the subject. Victor, maybe we should just order our food. But Victor was having too much fun to stop now. No, this is interesting. Tell me, Sarah the musician, what instrument do you play? Let me guess, piano? You look like a piano player. Sarah nodded slightly, wishing she could disappear. Piano, Victor said loudly. How wonderful! And I bet you thought you were going to be famous, didn't you? Playing concerts, making records, all that dreamy nonsense. Tears were starting to form in Sarah's eyes, but she tried hard not to let them fall. Can I please just take your order, sir? Of course you can, Victor said with a fake smile. We'll have a bottle of your most expensive wine. And Sarah, next time I come in, maybe you can play us a little song. I'd love to hear what kind of music they teach in schools these days. His friends laughed again, though some of them looked away. Sarah quickly wrote down their wine order and hurried away from the table. Victor watched her go, feeling pleased with himself. Did you see how uncomfortable she got? Victor said to his friends. These people need to learn their place in the world. She probably spent 4 years and thousands of dollars learning to play piano, and now she's serving tables. That's what happens when you chase silly dreams instead of focusing on making money. Robert, who was the kindest of Victor's friends, shifted in his seat. Maybe we should leave her alone, Victor. She seems like a nice girl. Victor laughed coldly. Nice doesn't pay the bills, Robert. Nice doesn't make you successful. This girl learned that lesson the hard way, and now she knows where she belongs. When Sarah brought their wine, Victor continued to make comments about her failed music career. He asked her if she still played piano, if she missed being a starving artist, and if she regretted not choosing a real career. Each question was like a knife in Sarah's heart. She had worked so hard to forget about her musical dreams, to accept her life as it was now. But this cruel man was forcing her to remember everything she had lost. Throughout the evening, Victor kept finding ways to embarrass Sarah. When she brought their food, he asked her to hum a little tune for them. When she refilled their water glasses, he wondered out loud if she could play requests, or if she only knew fancy classical stuff that nobody likes. His friends grew more uncomfortable as the night went on, but none of them had the courage to tell Victor to stop. They all depended on him for business deals and social connections. They were afraid that if they stood up to him, he would cut them out of his life. By the end of the evening, Sarah looked exhausted and defeated. Victor had spent 3 hours making fun of her dreams and her current situation. He had turned her pain into his entertainment. As they were leaving, Victor had one more idea. You know what, boys? I think I'm going to throw a party next week. A big dinner party at my house. And I think I know exactly who I want to cater it. He looked back at Sarah, who was clearing tables nearby. A cruel smile spread across his face. I think our musical waitress here would be perfect for the job. And maybe, if we're very lucky, she might even give us a little concert. His friends looked at each other nervously. They knew that look on Victor's face. He was planning something. Something that would hurt the young waitress even more than he had already hurt her tonight. But Victor did not care about their concerns. He was already imagining the fun he would have at his party, with Sarah as his unwilling entertainment. In his mind, he was doing her a favor by giving her a chance to use her useless education. He did not think about her feelings or her dignity. To him, she was just another toy to play with, another way to show his friends how powerful and important he was. 3 days after Victor's cruel dinner at the restaurant, Sarah was trying to forget about the embarrassing evening. She had told herself that men like Victor Blackwood were just part of working in a fancy restaurant. Rich people sometimes said mean things because they thought their money made them better than everyone else. But forgetting was hard. Every time she served a table, she remembered his cold laugh and the way he had made fun of her dreams. She had worked so hard to push her musical past away, to accept her new life, and he had forced her to remember all the pain of giving up everything she loved. Sarah was refilling salt shakers in the empty restaurant when Mr. Peterson, the manager, walked over to her. He looked excited, which was unusual for him. Mr. Peterson was normally a worried, nervous man who rarely smiled. "Sarah," he said, "I have some interesting news for you." Sarah looked up from the salt shaker she was filling. "What kind of news?" "I just got off the phone with Victor Blackwood. You know, the man from Table 8 the other night? He wants to hire you for a private catering job." Sarah's stomach dropped. She did not want to see Victor Blackwood again, ever. "I don't think that's a good idea, Mr. Peterson." "Wait, let me tell you the details first," Mr. Peterson said quickly. "He's having a dinner party at his mansion next Saturday, about 30 guests. He specifically asked for you to handle the serving and catering. And Sarah, the money is incredible." Sarah waited, knowing that Mr. Peterson was about to say something that would be hard to refuse. "He's offering $5,000 for one night of work." Sarah's eyes went wide. $5,000 was more money than she usually made in 3 months. It was enough to pay for her mother's treatment and still have money left over for rent and groceries. "5,000?" she asked, not believing what she heard. "That's right. He said he was impressed with your service the other night and wants you to work his party. Sarah, this could solve a lot of your problems." Sarah thought about her mother, who had been getting weaker every day. The doctor had said the treatment could not wait much longer. $5,000 would change everything for them. But something felt wrong. Why would Victor Blackwood, who had been so mean to her, suddenly want to hire her? And why would he pay so much money for one night of work? "Did he say why he wants me specifically?" Sarah asked. Mr. Peterson looked a little uncomfortable. "He said something about wanting someone with, what did he call it? Cultural background. He mentioned that you had studied music and that his guests would appreciate having someone educated serving them." Sarah felt a cold fear in her stomach. Victor had not forgotten about her musical education. He was planning something, but she did not know what. "I don't know, Mr. Peterson. Something doesn't feel right about this." "Sarah," Mr. Peterson said, "seriously, I know that man was a little rude the other night, but this is $5,000. When will you ever get another opportunity like this?" Sarah thought about her mother's medicine cabinet, full of pills that cost more than Sarah made in a week. She thought about the doctor's worried face when he talked about her mother's condition. She thought about all the bills that came in the mail every day, bills she could not afford to pay. "What exactly would I have to do?" she asked. "Just the usual catering work. Serve dinner, clean up, make sure the guests are happy. He said the party starts at 7 and should be over by 11. 4 hours of work for $5,000, Sarah. That's more than most people make in a month." Sarah closed her eyes and tried to think clearly. She knew Victor Blackwood was not a kind man. She knew he had some reason for wanting her at his party, and it probably was not a good reason. But $5,000 could save her mother's life. "When do I have to give him an answer?" she asked. "He wants to know by tomorrow morning. Sarah, I really think you should take this job. The restaurant can spare you for one Saturday night, and the money will help your family so much." That evening, Sarah went home to her small apartment. Her mother was sitting in her favorite chair reading a book. She looked thin and tired, but she smiled when Sarah walked in. "How was work today, dear?" her mother asked. "It was fine, Mom. How are you feeling?" "A little tired, but not too bad. The doctor called today. He wants to schedule the treatment for next week." Sarah's heart sank. Next week was even sooner than she had expected. "What did you tell him?" I told him we needed a few more days to get the money together. I know you're working as hard as you can, Sarah. Maybe we can ask the hospital if they have a payment plan. Sarah knew that hospitals did have payment plans, but they also charged interest that would make the debt even bigger. Her family would be paying for this treatment for years and years. That night, Sarah lay in bed thinking about Victor Blackwood's job offer. She tried to imagine what he might be planning. Maybe he wanted to embarrass her in front of his rich friends. Maybe he would make her wear a funny costume or do something humiliating. But even if he did embarrass her, it would only be for one flight. 4 hours of embarrassment in exchange for $5,000 and her mother's health. When she thought about it that way, it seemed like an easy choice. The next morning, Sarah called Mr. Peterson before her shift started. "I'll take the job," she said. "Great. I'll call Mr. Blackwood right away and let him know." 2 hours later, Mr. Peterson called Sarah back with more details. Victor wanted her to arrive at his house at 5 o'clock on Saturday to prepare for the party. He would provide all the food and drinks. She just needed to wear a nice black dress and be ready to serve his guests. He also said something else, Mr. Peterson added, sounding a little confused. He said to make sure your fingernails are clean and your hands look nice. He was very specific about that. Sarah felt the cold fear in her stomach again. Why would he care about her hands unless he was planning something that involved them? But she had already said yes, and she needed the money too much to change her mind now. For the rest of the week, Sarah tried not to think about Saturday night. She worked her regular shifts, took care of her mother, and tried to push away the feeling that she was walking into a trap. On Friday night, she sat at the old piano in her apartment and played quietly. The keys felt familiar under her fingers, even though she had not played much in recent months. She played some of the simple pieces she remembered from her school days, letting the music calm her worried mind. Her mother heard the music and came to sit beside her. "You sound beautiful, dear. I wish you still had time to play more often." "Maybe after this job tomorrow night things will be different," Sarah said. "Maybe I'll have more time for music." What Sarah did not know was that Victor Blackwood was at his mansion that same evening, looking at his expensive grand piano and planning exactly how he would use Sarah's musical skills to entertain his guests. He had invited some of the most important people in the city to his party, and he wanted to give them a show they would never forget. He was going to force the little waitress to play piano for everyone, expecting her to fail miserably and provide laughs for his friends. He had no idea that Sarah Martinez was not just any waitress with a little musical training. He had no idea that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Saturday evening arrived faster than Sarah wanted it to. She stood outside Victor Blackwood's mansion at exactly 5 o'clock, wearing her best black dress and carrying a small bag with extra supplies. The house was enormous, bigger than any building Sarah had ever been inside except for hotels and shopping centers. The mansion had tall white columns and perfectly cut gardens. Everything about it screamed money and power. Sarah felt very small as she walked up the long driveway to the front door. A stern-looking woman in a gray uniform answered the door. "You must be the catering girl," she said without smiling. "I'm Mrs. Williams, the house manager. Come in." Sarah followed Mrs. Williams through rooms filled with expensive furniture and paintings. The house was like a museum, with everything perfectly clean and arranged. Sarah was afraid to touch anything, worried she might break something that cost more than her family's entire apartment. "The kitchen is through here," Mrs. Williams said, leading Sarah down a long hallway. "All the food has been prepared by the regular catering company. Your job is just to serve it and clean up. The guests will start arriving at 7. The kitchen was bigger than Sarah's entire apartment. There were 2 ovens, 3 refrigerators, and a counter space that seemed to go on forever. Trays of expensive food were arranged and ready to be served. Sarah had never seen so much fancy food in one place. "Mr. Blackwood wants to speak with you before the guests arrive," Mrs. Williams said. "He's in the main living room." Sarah followed Mrs. Williams to a huge room with high ceilings and a fireplace big enough for a person to stand inside. Victor Blackwood was standing by the window looking out at his perfect gardens. He was wearing an expensive black suit and had a glass of wine in his hand. "Ah, Sarah," he said when he saw her. acting like they were old friends. So glad you could make it. This is going to be a very special evening. Thank you for hiring me, Mr. Blackwood, Sarah said politely. Victor walked closer to her, and Sarah could see the mean look in his eyes that she remembered from the restaurant. I've told some of my guests about you, he said. About your interesting background. Sarah felt her heart start to beat faster. My background? Your musical education. Several of my guests tonight are very cultured people. They appreciate the arts. I thought they might enjoy meeting someone who studied music at such a prestigious school. Sarah wanted to ask why her education mattered for a catering job, but she was afraid to make Victor angry. She needed this money too much to risk losing the job now. I see you've noticed my piano, Victor said, pointing to a huge black grand piano in the corner of the room. It was the most beautiful piano Sarah had ever seen, shiny and perfect like everything else in the house. It's beautiful, Sarah said honestly. It cost more than most people make in 5 years, Victor said proudly. Of course I don't play myself. I'm much too busy making money to waste time on hobbies. But I like to have beautiful things around me. Sarah nodded, not knowing what to say. The guests will be arriving soon. Victor continued. I want you to serve drinks and appetizers for the first hour. Then we'll have dinner in the formal dining room. After dinner, we'll come back here for coffee and conversation. Victor paused and smiled in a way that made Sarah very uncomfortable. And then, my dear Sarah, I have a special surprise planned for everyone. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, the doorbell rang. The first guests were arriving. For the next hour, Sarah served drinks and small pieces of expensive food to Victor's guests. They were all rich, important-looking people. She recognized some of them from newspapers and television. There were business owners, politicians, and people who seemed to be famous for being rich. The guests mostly ignored Sarah, treating her like a piece of furniture that moved around the room. They talked about their expensive cars, their vacation homes, and their business deals. They laughed loudly and drank a lot of wine. Sarah noticed that several of the guests seemed different from the others. There was a woman with gray hair who looked at the paintings on the walls with great interest. There was an older man who kept looking at Victor's piano with knowing eyes. These people seemed more cultured and educated than Victor's usual friends. During dinner, Sarah served course after course of fancy food. The guests ate and drank and talked about themselves. Victor was the loudest of all, telling stories about his business deals and how much money he had made. The secret to success, Victor said loudly, is knowing your place in the world. Some people are born to lead and some people are born to serve. The key is accepting which one you are. Several guests nodded in agreement, though the cultured-looking woman frowned slightly. After dinner, everyone returned to the main living room for coffee. Sarah served coffee and expensive chocolates while the guests continued their conversations. She was starting to hope that the evening would end soon and she could collect her money and go home. But then Victor stood up and tapped his wine glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, he said loudly, I have a special treat for you tonight. As you know, I believe in giving people opportunities to show what they're made of. Sarah felt a cold dread wash over her. She had a terrible feeling she knew what was coming next. Our server tonight is not just any waitress, Victor continued. She actually has a college degree in music. She studied piano at one of the city's finest schools. All the guests turned to look at Sarah. She felt her face turn red and wished she could disappear. Of course, Victor went on with a cruel smile. That was before she learned that musical dreams don't pay the bills. Now she's discovered the dignity of honest work, serving people who actually contribute to society. Some of the guests laughed, though others looked uncomfortable. The cultured woman was frowning deeply now. But I thought tonight would be a perfect opportunity for Sarah to dust off her old skills, Victor said. After all, it's not often that someone gets to perform on a piano worth more than their yearly salary. Sarah's hands were shaking now. She realized that this had been Victor's plan all along. He had not hired her to cater his party. He had hired her to humiliate her in front of all these important people. Sarah, Victor said, looking directly at her, why don't you play us a little something? I'm sure my guests would love to hear. what kind of music they teach in schools these days. The room was completely quiet now. Everyone was staring at Sarah. She felt trapped, like a mouse in a corner with a cat ready to pounce. "I don't think that's a good idea," Sarah said quietly. "I'm here to work, not to perform." "Oh, but I insist," Victor said with fake kindness. "Consider it part of your job tonight. I'm paying you very well after all. Surely you can spare a few minutes to entertain my guests." Sarah looked around the room. Some of the guests looked excited to see what would happen. Others looked uncomfortable but did not say anything. The cultured woman looked angry, but she stayed quiet. "I haven't played in a long time," Sarah said, trying to find a way out. "I'm not prepared to perform." "That's perfectly fine," Victor said. "We're not expecting a professional concert. Just play something simple, something appropriate for someone in your current position in life." His words were like knives. Sarah realized that Victor wanted her to fail. He wanted her to sit at that expensive piano and embarrass herself in front of all these important people. He wanted to prove that she was just a failed musician who belonged in her place as a servant. Sarah looked at the beautiful piano in the corner. Once, pianos had been her best friends. Once, she had been able to make magic happen with her fingers on the keys. But that felt like a lifetime ago. "Go ahead," Victor said, gesturing toward the piano. "We're all waiting." Sarah walked slowly toward the piano. Her legs felt like they were made of lead. Every step was harder than the last. She could feel all those eyes watching her, waiting to see her fail. She sat down on the piano bench and looked at the keys. They were perfect and shiny, not worn and yellow like the old piano in her apartment. Her hands were shaking as she placed them on the keys. This was Victor's trap, and she had walked right into it. But she needed that $5,000 more than she needed her pride. She would play something simple and let these people laugh at her if that's what it took to save her mother. What Victor Blackwood did not know was that Sarah Martinez was not the failed musician he thought she was. He had no idea what he was about to unleash. Sarah sat at the beautiful piano bench, her hands trembling above the perfect white and black keys. The room was completely silent. 30 pairs of eyes were watching her, waiting to see her embarrass herself. Victor Blackwood stood nearby with a cruel smile, ready to enjoy her failure. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about her mother at home, probably asleep in her chair with a book in her lap. She thought about the $5,000 that would pay for the treatment that could save her mother's life. She thought about all the bills on their kitchen table and all the nights she had worked until her feet bled in her cheap shoes. Then she thought about her father. Before he died, he used to sit and listen to her practice piano. He would close his eyes and smile when she played. And afterwards he would say, "Music is the language of the heart, Sarah. When you play, you're speaking directly to people's souls." Sarah opened her eyes and looked at the piano keys. Her hands stopped shaking. She had been afraid of this moment for 3 years, afraid of remembering what she had lost. But now, sitting at this expensive piano in front of these rich strangers, she realized something important. She had not lost her music. She had only hidden it away. Sarah placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. But she did not play something simple and easy like Victor expected. Instead, she began the opening notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, one of the most difficult and beautiful pieces in all of classical music. The first notes were soft and gentle, like a whisper. Sarah's fingers moved across the keys with perfect precision, each note clear and pure. The melody was sad and beautiful, telling a story without words. The guests in the room stopped breathing. This was not what they had expected to hear from a waitress who supposedly could barely play piano. As Sarah continued to play, the music grew more complex. Her left hand played a complicated bass line, while her right hand danced through intricate melodies. The piece required incredible technical skill, perfect timing, and deep musical understanding. It was the kind of music that only truly gifted pianists could play well. Victor's confident smile began to fade. This was not going according to his plan. The music filled the huge room, echoing off the high ceilings and expensive walls. Sarah played with her eyes closed now, lost in the world of the music. Her fingers moved with impossible speed and accuracy, never missing a note, never hesitating. The cultured woman with gray hair gasped quietly. She recognized the piece and knew how difficult it was to play. She also recognized something else. This young woman was not just playing the notes correctly. She was interpreting the music with the skill and sensitivity of a professional concert pianist. As the piece progressed, it became more dramatic and intense. Sarah's whole body moved with the music, her shoulders swaying, her head moving with the rhythm. She was no longer the nervous, embarrassed waitress. She was a musician, completely in her element. The older man who had been looking at the piano earlier leaned forward in his chair. He was Dr. James Chen, director of the city's most prestigious music foundation. He had heard hundreds of pianists in his career, and he knew exceptional talent when he heard it. This young woman was extraordinary. Sarah reached the most difficult section of the piece where the melody soared above a cascade of rapid notes in the bass. Her fingers flew across the keys, never stumbling, never slowing down. The music was passionate and powerful, filled with emotion and technical brilliance. Victor's business friends looked confused and uncomfortable. They had come expecting to laugh at a servant's embarrassing attempt to play piano. Instead, they were witnessing a performance that was better than most professional concerts they had attended. The music built to a climactic moment, with both hands playing complex rhythms and harmonies that seemed impossible for one person to manage. But Sarah managed it all with ease, her face calm and focused, her hands working like those of a master craftsman. Near the back of the room, a woman with dark hair and expensive jewelry was watching Sarah with intense interest. This was Elena Rossetti, one of the most important concert promoters in the country. She had discovered and launched the careers of dozens of classical musicians. She knew true talent when she saw it, and she was seeing it now. As the piece moved toward its conclusion, Sarah opened her eyes and looked out at the audience. For a moment, she forgot where she was. She forgot about Victor's cruel plan, about her job as a waitress, about all the pain and struggle of the past 3 years. She was just a musician sharing beautiful music with people who were listening. The final section of the ballade was gentle again, like the beginning, but with a deeper sadness and wisdom. Sarah played these last notes with perfect control, letting each one ring out in the silent room. Her hands moved with grace and certainty, drawing every bit of beauty from the magnificent piano. The last note faded into silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. The room was so quiet that Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. She kept her hands on the keys, not sure what would happen next. Then Dr. Chen started to clap. His applause was slow and deliberate, the kind of clapping reserved for truly exceptional performances. Elena Rossetti joined him, then the cultured woman with gray hair. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding. But this was not polite party applause. This was the kind of applause that musicians dream about, loud and enthusiastic and full of genuine appreciation. Several people were shaking their heads in amazement. Others were wiping away tears that the beautiful music had brought to their eyes. Sarah sat at the piano bench, stunned. She had not heard applause like this since her student days, when she performed at school concerts. She had forgotten how good it felt to share her music with people who truly appreciated it. Victor Blackwood stood frozen in place, his mouth slightly open. His plan to humiliate Sarah had failed completely. Instead of embarrassing her, he had given her a stage to show her incredible talent to some of the most important people in the city's cultural world. But the evening was not over yet. As the applause died down, Dr. Chen stood up from his chair and walked toward the piano. "Young lady," he said in a voice filled with respect, "that was an absolutely magnificent performance. Where did you study music?" Sarah looked at him uncertainly, still not believing what had just happened. "I studied at the Metropolitan Conservatory," she said quietly. Dr. Chen's eyebrows went up. The Metropolitan Conservatory was one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. Only the most talented students were accepted there. "And your teacher was?" Dr. Chen asked. "Professor Margaret Williams," Sarah replied. Several people in the room gasped. Professor Williams was a legend in the classical music world, famous for training some of the greatest pianists of the past 50 years. Elena Rossetti stepped forward now, her eyes bright with excitement. "My dear," she said to Sarah, "I think we need to have a very serious conversation." The applause was still ringing in Sarah's ears as Elena Rossetti approached the piano. Elena was an elegant woman in her 50s, with dark hair and the kind of confidence that came from years of working with the world's greatest musicians. "What is your full name, dear?" Elena asked gently. "Sarah Martinez," Sarah replied, still sitting at the piano bench, hardly believing what had just happened. Elena's face changed suddenly, her eyes widening with recognition. She turned to Dr. Chen, who was standing nearby with the same shocked expression. "Did she say Martinez?" Elena whispered to Dr. Chen. "I think she did," Dr. Chen whispered back. Elena turned back to Sarah, studying her face carefully. "Sarah Martinez from the Metropolitan Conservatory. You won the National Young Artist Competition when you were 22, didn't you?" Sarah's heart stopped. Nobody had mentioned that competition in 3 years. "Yes," she said quietly. "But that was a long time ago." "A long time ago?" Elena laughed, but not in a mean way. "That was only 3 years ago. You were supposed to start touring with the National Symphony Orchestra. I remember reading about you in all the music magazines. You were called the most promising young pianist of your generation." The other guests were listening with fascination. Now, even Victor's business friends who knew nothing about classical music could tell that something very important was happening. Dr. Chen stepped closer. "Sarah, what happened to you? You just disappeared from the music world. One day you were the most talked about young pianist in the country, and then suddenly nobody heard from you again." Sarah felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "My father died," she said simply. "He had a heart attack and my family had no money. My mother got sick from the stress, and I had to quit school to take care of her and pay the medical bills." The room was completely silent now. Even Victor had stopped smiling. "You gave up your entire career to take care of your family?" Elena asked softly. Sarah nodded. "I didn't have a choice. The music world seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford anymore." Elena shook her head in amazement. "Do you have any idea how many people have been looking for you? After you won that competition, every major concert hall in the country wanted to book you. Record companies were calling my office asking how to reach you. When you disappeared, people thought you had gone to study in Europe or something." "People were looking for me?" Sarah asked, not believing it. "Looking for you? My dear girl, there's a waiting list of orchestras that want to perform with you. I have had at least 20 phone calls in the past 3 years from conductors asking if I knew how to contact Sarah Martinez." Dr. Chen was nodding vigorously. "Sarah, when you won that competition, the judges said it was the most extraordinary performance they had seen in decades. One of them told me that you had the kind of talent that comes along maybe once in a generation." Sarah started to cry now, not from sadness, but from a mixture of joy and disbelief. For 3 years, she had convinced herself that her musical dreams were over, that she had been foolish to think she could make a living as a pianist. Now these important people were telling her that her dreams had been more real than she ever imagined. The cultured woman with gray hair approached the piano. "My name is Margaret Thornfield," she said. "I'm the music critic for the City Tribune. I reviewed your competition performance 3 years ago. I called it a revelation of pure musical genius. I have been wondering what happened to you ever since." Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I read your review," she said. "I kept it in my piano bench at home. It was one of the few things that made me believe I might actually be good enough to be a real musician." "Good enough?" Margaret laughed. "Sarah, you're not just good enough, you're extraordinary. What you just played tonight was better than most performances I hear at Carnegie Hall." Elena was practically bouncing with excitement. "Sarah, I don't think you understand what I'm trying to tell you. I can book you concerts starting next month. The Chicago Symphony has been asking about you for 2 years. The Boston Philharmonic wants to commission a recording with you." "But I haven't performed in 3 years," Sarah protested. "I work as a waitress now." I don't even own a good dress for concerts." "Honey," Elena said with a big smile, "after what I just heard, I don't care if you perform in your waitress uniform. You are still one of the most gifted pianists I have ever heard." Dr. Chen was nodding in agreement. "Sarah, the music foundation I run has a scholarship program for exceptional artists who need financial support. We could cover all your expenses while you get back into performing. We could also help with your mother's medical bills." Sarah felt like she was dreaming. "You would do that for me?" "Sarah," Dr. Chen said seriously, "artists like you are the reason our foundation exists. Supporting your career would be an honor for us." Meanwhile, Victor Blackwood was standing in the corner of his own living room, looking smaller and more uncomfortable with each passing minute. His cruel plan to humiliate a poor waitress had backfired in the worst possible way. Instead of embarrassing Sarah, he had accidentally brought together three of the most important people in the classical music world and revealed that his servant was actually a musical genius. Several of his guests were now looking at him with disgust and disapproval. They had seen his mean treatment of Sarah earlier in the evening, and now they knew that he had been bullying one of the most talented musicians in the country. Robert, Victor's business friend who had seemed uncomfortable with the bullying earlier, walked over to him. "Victor," he said quietly, "you should be ashamed of yourself. The way you treated that young woman was cruel and wrong." But Victor was too proud to admit his mistake. "How was I supposed to know she was some kind of musical genius?" he said defensively. "She's just a waitress." "No, Victor," Robert said, firmly. "She's a human being who deserves respect, whether she's a famous musician or a waitress or anything else. What you did tonight was disgusting." Several other guests overheard this conversation and nodded in agreement. Victor's reputation among his own friends was being damaged by his cruel behavior. Meanwhile, Elena was still talking excitedly with Sarah about concert opportunities. "There's a recital hall downtown that would be perfect for your comeback performance," she was saying. "We could schedule it for next month. And Sarah, the ticket sales alone would probably earn you more money than you make in a year at that restaurant." Sarah was starting to believe that this might actually be real. "What about my mother?" she asked. "I can't travel for concerts if I have to take care of her." "We'll hire the best private nurses in the city," Dr. Chen said immediately. "Your mother will have better care than she could get in any hospital. You'll be able to focus completely on your music." "And," Elena added with a mischievous smile, "I think the first thing we need to do is get you out of that waitress job. How would you like to give your notice tomorrow morning?" Sarah laughed through her tears. "I would like that very much." As the evening went on, Elena, Dr. Chen, and Margaret Thornfield surrounded Sarah, making plans for her return to the music world. They talked about concerts, recordings, and interviews. They discussed the best piano teachers in the city who could help her prepare for her comeback. Victor watched all of this from across the room, realizing that his attempt to hurt Sarah had actually changed her life in the most wonderful way possible. He had wanted to prove that she was a failure, but instead he had proven that she was a success beyond anything he could ever achieve. The irony was not lost on the other guests, who were beginning to see Victor Blackwood in a very different light than they had before. As Elena, Dr. Chen, and Margaret Thornfield continued making exciting plans for Sarah's musical comeback, the atmosphere in Victor Blackwood's mansion had completely changed. What had started as Victor's cruel entertainment had turned into Sarah's triumph, and everyone in the room could feel the shift. Elena pulled out her phone and started making calls right there in Victor's living room. "David, it's Elena Rossetti. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Remember that young pianist we lost track of 3 years ago, Sarah Martinez? Well, I just found her, and she's even more incredible than before." Sarah sat at the piano bench, still hardly believing what was happening. Dr. Chen sat beside her, asking gentle questions about her musical training and her plans for the future. "Sarah," Dr. Chen said, "I want you to know that what you did tonight took tremendous courage. It would have been easy to play something simple and safe. Instead, you chose one of the most challenging pieces in the piano repertoire. That tells me you're not just technically gifted, you have the heart of a true artist." Margaret Thornfield was taking notes in a small notebook. Sarah, I'd like to write a story about your journey for the Tribune. The headline could be something like, Lost Musical Genius Found Working as Waitress. It would let the whole city know that you're back. A newspaper story about me? Sarah asked, still feeling overwhelmed. Honey, Margaret laughed. After tonight, you're going to be famous all over again. People are going to want to know where you've been and why you disappeared. Your story is going to inspire a lot of people. Across the room, Victor was having a very different kind of evening. His guests were no longer paying attention to him or his expensive house. Instead, they were all focused on Sarah and her amazing talent. Several people had approached Victor to express their disapproval of how he had treated her. Patricia Whitmore, the wife of a prominent businessman, walked over to Victor with a stern expression. Victor Blackwood, I am appalled by your behavior. Tonight, that young woman is clearly a person of extraordinary talent and character, and you tried to humiliate her for your own amusement. Patricia, you don't understand, Victor started to say, but she cut him off. Oh, I understand perfectly. You thought it would be funny to embarrass someone you saw as beneath you. But the joke is on you, isn't it? You've just given one of the world's great pianists the stage she needed to restart her career. More guests were gathering around Victor now, and none of them looked happy with him. Thomas Richardson, a respected judge who had known Victor for years, shook his head sadly. Victor, I've watched you become more cruel and arrogant as you've gotten richer, Thomas said. But tonight you've shown a level of meanness that I find truly disturbing. That young woman has more class and dignity in her little finger than you have in your entire body. Victor tried to defend himself. How was I supposed to know she was some kind of musical prodigy? She works as a waitress. That's exactly the point, Victor, said Dr. Amanda Foster, a professor at the city's university. You judged her based on her job instead of seeing her as a human being. You assumed that because she serves tables, she must be worth less than you. Tonight proved how wrong and cruel that assumption was. Meanwhile, Elena had finished her phone calls and was practically glowing with excitement. Sarah, she announced, I have incredible news. The Symphony Hall has agreed to clear their calendar for you. We can schedule your comeback concert for 3 weeks from tonight. Sarah's eyes went wide. 3 weeks? But I haven't performed in public for 3 years. I don't know if I'm ready. Trust me, Elena said confidently. After what I just heard, you're more than ready. We'll get you the best piano coaches in the city to help you prepare. By the time you walk onto that stage, you'll feel like you never left. Dr. Chen was nodding enthusiastically. And Sarah, I've already spoken to our foundation's board members who are here tonight. We're prepared to offer you a full artist fellowship. That means we'll cover all your expenses, your mother's medical care, everything. You can focus entirely on your music. Sarah started crying again, overwhelmed by the generosity and kindness these people were showing her. Just a few hours ago, she had been worried about paying for her mother's treatment. Now not only would the treatment be covered, but her dreams of being a professional musician were coming true. I don't know how to thank you, Sarah said through her tears. Don't thank us, Margaret Thornfield said warmly. Thank yourself. You're the one who never gave up even when life got difficult. You're the one who kept your talent alive even when you couldn't use it. Tonight, you reminded all of us why music matters so much. Victor was now standing alone in his own living room. His friends had abandoned him to gather around Sarah, asking her about her music and her plans. Even his own business associates were treating him with coldness and disapproval. James Murphy, a man who had done millions of dollars worth of business with Victor over the years, approached him with a disgusted expression. Victor, I've been doing business with you for 10 years, but after tonight, I think that relationship needs to end. I can't work with someone who treats other people the way you treated that young woman. James, you're overreacting, Victor said desperately. It was just a little joke. A joke? James's voice was cold. You tried to destroy that girl's dignity for your own entertainment. That's not a joke, Victor. That's cruelty, pure and simple. Other guests were having similar conversations with Victor. People who had respected his business success were now seeing him for what he really was, a mean-spirited bully who used his wealth to hurt others. Sarah, meanwhile, was experiencing the opposite treatment. People were asking for her autograph, wanting to take pictures with her, and expressing their admiration for her talent and her character. "Sarah," said Elena, "I want you to meet someone very special." She brought over a young man in his 30s with kind eyes and a warm smile. "This is Michael Chen, Dr. Chen's son. He's also a pianist and he runs a music school for underprivileged children." Michael shook Sarah's hand with genuine warmth. "Sarah, what you did tonight was incredible, but I'm even more impressed by your story. The fact that you gave up your career to take care of your mother shows what kind of person you are. I hope you'll consider working with our music program when you're ready. We have so many talented kids who need to see that their dreams are possible." Sarah was touched by Michael's invitation. "I would love that," she said. "Music changed my life, and I want to help it change other people's lives too." As the evening wound down, Elena handed Sarah a business card and a contract. "Sarah, this is a recording contract with Steinway Records. They want to produce your comeback album. The advance payment alone will be enough to solve all your financial problems." Sarah looked at the contract, seeing numbers that seemed impossible. More money than she had ever dreamed of, just for doing what she loved most in the world. "There's one more thing," Elena said with a mischievous smile. She turned to look at Victor, who was still standing alone and looking miserable. "Sarah, I think you should thank Mr. Blackwood for tonight." Sarah looked confused. "Thank him?" "Yes," Elena said loudly, making sure Victor could hear. "If he hadn't been so cruel and forced you to play tonight, none of this would have happened. His meanness accidentally gave you exactly what you needed, a chance to show the world your incredible talent." Sarah walked over to Victor, who looked ashamed and defeated. The cruel, confident man from earlier in the evening was gone, replaced by someone who was finally beginning to understand the consequences of his actions. "Mr. Blackwood," Sarah said with dignity and grace, "thank you for tonight. You thought you were giving me a punishment, but instead you gave me back my life." Victor couldn't meet her eyes. For the first time in years, he felt truly small and worthless. Sarah turned back to her new friends and supporters, leaving Victor alone with his shame and regret. The tables had completely turned, and everyone in the room knew it. 3 weeks later, Sarah Martinez stood in the wings of Symphony Hall, wearing a beautiful black concert gown that Elena had helped her choose. Her hands were calm now, no longer shaking with nerves or fear. In just a few minutes, she would walk onto the stage where the greatest pianist in the world had performed. The concert hall was completely sold out. Word of Sarah's story had spread through the city like wildfire after Margaret Thornfield's newspaper article was published. The headline read, "The Waitress Who Shocked the City. Lost Musical Genius Makes Triumphant Return." The story had been picked up by national news stations and social media, inspiring people around the world. Sarah's mother was sitting in the front row, looking healthy and strong after receiving the best medical treatment money could buy. The expensive treatment had worked even better than the doctors had hoped. Sarah's mother no longer looked tired and sick. Instead, she glowed with pride and joy as she waited to hear her daughter perform. "Are you ready, Sarah?" Elena asked, appearing beside her with an encouraging smile. Sarah nodded. "I'm ready." She had spent the past 3 weeks preparing for this moment. The best piano teachers in the city had worked with her, helping her refine her technique and prepare a program of beautiful music. But Sarah had discovered something wonderful during those weeks of practice. She had never really lost her skill. The music had been waiting inside her all along, ready to emerge when she needed it. Sarah walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The audience rose to their feet, clapping not just for her musical talent but for her incredible journey from struggling waitress to celebrated pianist. In the audience, she could see Dr. Chen, Margaret Thornfield, and dozens of other people who had become her supporters and friends. She also noticed that the concert hall was filled with working people, waitresses, store clerks, construction workers, and others who had read her story and felt inspired by her journey. These people had saved their money to buy tickets because they wanted to see proof that dreams could come true, even after terrible setbacks. Sarah sat at the beautiful grand piano and began to play. Her program included the same Chopin ballade that had changed her life at Victor's party, but she also played pieces by Mozart, Liszt, and Rachmaninoff. Each piece was performed with technical perfection and deep emotional understanding. The audience was completely mesmerized. People who had never listened to classical music before found themselves moved to tears by Sarah's playing. Her music spoke to something deep in their hearts, reminding them of their own dreams and hopes. When Sarah finished her last piece, the audience exploded in applause that lasted for 10 minutes. People were standing, cheering, and many were crying with joy. Sarah took bow after bow, feeling overwhelmed by the love and support from the crowd. After the concert, there was a reception where people could meet Sarah and congratulate her. The Millionaire line of well-wishers stretched around the block. Many of them were working people who wanted to tell Sarah that her story had inspired them to pursue their own dreams again. "Miss Martinez," said a young woman who worked at a grocery store, "I used to paint, but I gave it up when money got tight. After reading about you, I started painting again. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to follow your dreams." Similar stories came from dozens of people: a construction worker who had started writing poetry again, a bus driver who had returned to singing, a cleaning lady who had begun taking dance classes. Sarah's comeback had given hope to countless people who thought their dreams were gone forever. Elena appeared at Sarah's side with exciting news. "Sarah, I just got off the phone with Carnegie Hall in New York. They want to book you for a performance next month, and there are requests coming in from London, Paris, and Tokyo. You're going to be performing all over the world." Sarah smiled, but her expression was thoughtful. "Elena, I want to perform in all those wonderful places, but I also want to do something here at home. What do you have in mind?" "I want to start a music program for people who work regular jobs but have musical dreams. People like I was. People who think their dreams are impossible because they have to work to survive. I want to show them that music can still be part of their lives." Elena's eyes lit up. "Sarah, that's a beautiful idea. With your story and your talent, you could inspire thousands of people." Dr. Chen joined their conversation, beaming with pride. "Sarah, our foundation would be honored to support a program like that. We believe that music should be available to everyone, not just people who can afford expensive schools." Meanwhile, across the city, Victor Blackwood was sitting alone in his mansion. He had not been invited to Sarah's concert, and none of his former friends were speaking to him anymore. The story of his cruel treatment of Sarah had damaged his reputation badly. Several of his business partners had ended their relationships with him, and he was facing social isolation for the first time in his life. Victor had spent the past 3 weeks thinking about what had happened that night. For the first time, he was beginning to understand how much pain he had caused other people over the years. He realized that his money and success meant nothing if he used them to hurt others. That evening, Victor did something he had never done before. He wrote a letter to Sarah, apologizing for his behavior and asking if there was anything he could do to make up for the pain he had caused her. He didn't expect her to forgive him, but he needed to try to make things right. Sarah received Victor's letter a few days later. She read it carefully, seeing that it was filled with genuine remorse and regret. The letter ended with an offer. Victor wanted to donate money to help Sarah start her music program for working people. Sarah thought about the letter for a long time. She remembered how much Victor's cruelty had hurt her, but she also remembered the lessons her father had taught her about forgiveness and compassion. A week later, Sarah called Victor's house. When he answered the phone, his voice sounded different, humbler and sadder than before. "Mr. Blackwood," Sarah said, "I received your letter. I accept your apology, and I would like to accept your offer to help with the music program." Victor was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah," he said finally, "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm grateful for it. And I promise you that I will spend the rest of my life trying to be better than I was." 6 months later, the Sarah Martinez Music Foundation opened its doors in a beautiful building that Victor had donated. The program offered free music lessons, instruments, and performance opportunities to anyone who wanted to learn, regardless of their job or financial situation. Sarah performed regularly at the world's greatest concert halls, but she also performed every month at her foundation, sharing music with people who reminded her of herself during those difficult years as a waitress. Her mother, now healthy and strong, worked at the foundation as well, helping to coordinate programs and support students. She often told people that she was prouder of Sarah's kindness and generosity than she was of her musical fame. Victor Blackwood also volunteered at the foundation, doing humble tasks like setting up chairs and cleaning instruments. He never asked for recognition or praise. He was simply trying to make up for years of cruelty by helping others pursue their dreams. Sarah's story continued to inspire people around the world. She proved that talent and dreams could survive even the most difficult circumstances, and that kindness and perseverance were more powerful than cruelty and arrogance. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah showed that success was not just about achieving your own dreams. It was about using your success to help others achieve theirs, too. The waitress who had been forced to play piano to shame her had become a symbol of hope for dreamers everywhere. And in concert halls around the world, whenever Sarah took the stage, the audience knew they were not just hearing beautiful music, they were witnessing the triumph of the human spirit over adversity. Victor Blackwood had tried to prove that some people were born to serve while others were born to lead. Instead, he had accidentally proven something much more beautiful, that every person has the potential for greatness, and that sometimes the most extraordinary gifts can be found in the most unexpected places.